For months now, it really feels like the whole world has been watching a massive geopolitical pressure cooker just threatening to boil over, paralyzing global markets and putting millions of people totally on edge. Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a potentially historic pivot, the recently reported ceasefire framework between Iran and the United States. We're going to dive right past the headlines to understand exactly what this framework entails, the absolutely immense economic stakes involved, and what the path forward actually requires from both sides. So think about this for a second. What if two nations on the absolute edge of a wider war suddenly chose diplomacy? It's a pretty powerful thought, right? After an agonizing period of really severe tension, rapid military posturing, and just skyrocketing global uncertainty, this is the exact shift we're reportedly witnessing. Honestly, we were staring down a scenario that pushed the entire region dangerously close to a major, destabilizing conflict. The international community was basically waiting with bated breath, bracing for the worst. And then, this unexpected development, a real diplomatic opening. So let's walk through exactly how this pivot actually materialized and what it really means for global stability. Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the brink of conflict. To really get how big this is, we have to look at the two dangerously colliding forces that got us here. Escalating military confrontations on one side, and intense economic pressure on the other. On the military front, look, this wasn't just rhetoric. We saw tangible escalations out there. We're talking drone deployments, heightened naval patrols in contested waters, and a surge in proxy skirmishes that really threatened to draw in neighboring states. The risk of a fatal miscalculation? It was literally higher than it had been in over a decade. But simultaneously, you had economic pressures pushing the situation right to the breaking point. Stringent sanctions effectively choked off critical revenue streams. That plunged domestic economies into deep distress, drove up inflation, and created this deeply volatile environment. As you can imagine, governments everywhere were incredibly worried. Energy markets were seeing wild intraday swings, and institutional investors were pulling back hard, prepping for a worst-case scenario. Regardless of your geopolitical positioning, these two pressures created a completely unsustainable dynamic. It had the entire world economy balanced right on a knife's edge. Which brings us to Section 2, a diplomatic breakthrough. Now, this newly reported agreement, it's built on a very specific two-step framework. Step 1, ending direct hostilities to immediately freeze the military escalation. Now, to be clear, this isn't a comprehensive peace treaty. Think of it more like a critical cooling-off period. By mutually agreeing to just halt those immediate military maneuvers, both sides effectively hit the pause button, eliminating that immediate threat of an accidental escalation. Then there's Step 2, establishing a process for continued negotiations. This right here is where the real heavy-lifting diplomacy begins. It opens the door to structured talks on much more complex, intractable issues. And the sequencing here is absolutely vital. I mean, you just can't negotiate long-term geopolitical agreements while simultaneously prepping for a regional war. It doesn't work. Step 1 creates the necessary breathing room, while Step 2 provides the roadmap. For a lot of analysts, successfully linking these two steps represents the most significant diplomatic progress we've seen in the region in years. It's an active attempt to actually test diplomacy itself, to see if highly structured dialogue can achieve what years of posturing just couldn't. Moving on to Section 3, global economic stakes. When we talk about global anxiety in this situation, at the absolute center of it all sits the Strait of Hormuz. Because this narrow waterway is literally the ultimate lifeline for global trade. Reopening and stabilizing maritime traffic here naturally became the highest priority in these negotiations. For those of you closely tracking global logistics, you already know this isn't just a random point on a map. Any disruption in this specific geographic choke point sends immediate shockwaves through international shipping routes. We're talking insurance premiums for commercial vessels skyrocketing, delays cascading through major ports, and the fundamental stability of the region's trade network being thrown into total jeopardy. So securing safe passage through this corridor wasn't just some regional talking point. It was an absolute imperative for the broader international community. Just to put that into perspective, roughly 30% of the world's traded energy supplies pass right through the strait. 30%! That transforms abstract geopolitics into a direct hit on the global economy, and honestly, right into your wallet. When military tensions threaten to close or restrict this waterway, global oil prices react immediately and violently. A sudden spike in crude prices directly impacts the cost of fuel, aviation, and manufacturing, but it certainly doesn't stop there. The ripple effects on global supply chains are just immense. Higher freight costs inevitably lead to higher prices for everyday consumer goods. It essentially acts as a massive tax on global economic recovery. So whether it's businesses operating on super thin margins, shipping companies managing complex logistics, or central banks trying to fight inflation, keeping this maritime traffic stable is absolutely critical. That is exactly why financial markets, from Tokyo all the way to Wall Street, have been closely following every single development in these negotiations. The health of our global economy is intrinsically linked to the steady flow of energy through this one singular choke point.
Let's look at what's next in Section 4, the fragile road ahead.
Because let's be real, an announcement is just the starting line. The actual survival of this framework depends entirely on clearing three massive hurdles: implementation, verification, and future commitments. First up, implementation. This means taking those high-level political agreements and translating them into actionable, real-world directives. So, standing down naval assets, halting specific military exercises, and ensuring regional proxies actually adhere to the ceasefire. Then comes verification, which is arguably the most difficult piece of the whole puzzle. I mean, how do both sides actually confirm compliance? This usually requires sophisticated third-party monitoring, enhanced access for international inspectors, and rigorous technical surveillance just to make sure nobody is cheating. And finally, future commitments. This initial freeze really only holds up if both sides can see a viable path forward to address those core issues, whether that involves sanctions relief or limitations on specific defense programs. Experts are remarkably clear on this. The coming weeks, where these mechanics are ironed out in real time, will absolutely determine whether this agreement actually survives the complexities of the real world.
And history is very, very clear on this. Ceasefires absolutely can succeed, but they will inevitably collapse if trust disappears. This next phase of negotiations is targeting the larger, deeply entrenched issues that have divided these two sides for years. So every single future meeting, every public statement, and every technical concession matters immensely. If trust falters over those verification protocols or the timeline of implementation we just talked about, this entire framework could rapidly unravel. The opportunity for de-escalation absolutely exists, right here, right now, but it demands an extraordinary amount of delicate, sustained diplomatic work to build and maintain the bare minimum of trust required just to keep both sides at the table.
Ultimately, it all boils down to what one regional expert accurately noted. Peace means stability, economic recovery, and reduced uncertainty about the future. The stakes tied to the success of this dialogue are just staggering. Way beyond the geopolitical chess match, a successful ceasefire secures the economic recovery of fragile global markets and vastly reduces uncertainty across the board. It means supply chains can finally stabilize, inflation pressures tied to energy can actually ease up, and leaders, investors, and everyday citizens everywhere can look to the economic horizon with a degree of confidence that, frankly, has been absent for far too long.
So the world is watching closely, but for now, we wait. Keep a close eye on those verification and implementation steps, because they're going to answer the ultimate question. Is this the foundation of a lasting peace, or merely a temporary pause before the next major crisis? The opportunity clearly exists, and in international politics, an opportunity is exactly where history begins. Whether this reshapes the Middle East for years to come, or simply delays further conflict, depends entirely on the actions taken in the days ahead. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and I'll see you next time.